This is Dinara Tengri, and before we go on with this month's episode of Fandom X Archive, I have a little message for all the companies that are using other people's work to train their so-called AI models. No part of this podcast may be used to train your so-called AI models, you opportunistic pathogens. With that out of the way, let's get on with the episode. This month, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to continue our much coveted The Fanfic Files series, and we're going to read a little fanfic called Too Much Cheese by my friend Katie Parsons. Now, if you follow me on Twitch, you may know that we have already read that fanfic. We did 2 live streams. However, there were some technical problems with those particular streams, so I decided to record the fanfic reading from scratch. So without further ado, let's get into Too Much Cheese by Pieces of Kate. Too Much Cheese by Pieces of Kate. Part 1. Mulder comes into work after experiencing an extremely strange evening, and Scully tries to convince him it was just a dream. Note from the author: I originally wrote this story and its sequel for fanfiction.net when I was a teen, and it got a bit of laughs. I resurrected it after discovering that X-Files fanfiction is still very much alive and thriving. So I have you guys to thank for that. Mulder's office, 12:05 p.m. Scully sat at her computer, typing up the previous day's notes, an exercise that had become one of redaction. She glanced at her watch. Finally, the door swung open, and in walked a rather bedazzled Fox Mulder. His hair was windswept, and his tie was crooked. And more to the point, it matched. Something was wrong. "Mulder, are you okay?" Mulder looked around the office like he didn't recognize it, as if someone had attacked it with feng shui in a deliberate attempt to confuse him. "Mulder, what's wrong?" Scully stood up, concerned. I didn't get any sleep last night. Scully raised her eyebrows at him. "Go on." "I thought it was a dream, but it seemed so real. Well, maybe not real, but I don't know, vivid somehow." "Want to talk about it?" Mulder nodded. He raced along the empty streets, his breath short and his pulse racing. He had to get there. He had to get to the warehouse, to Scully. The streets seemed to become darker as he ran, and it was with a blow the size of Manhattan that he realized he was no longer in his own street, but on some unknown path. No, an alleyway. He stopped, noticing an anomaly in the otherwise natural surroundings. What the hell is that? Something stood far in front of him, swaying gently in the breeze. As he cautiously neared it, he began to see its features more clearly. It was bigger than he was, kind of furry and yellow and... "Big Bird, Mulder? You ran into Big Bird?" she queried skeptically. "It was definitely him, Scully, trust me. I had all the books." She didn't know what was more disturbing, the fact that he thought he saw Big Bird or the fact that he idolized him as a kid. So, in light of my new discovery, I carried on running. Frowning and stumbling, he continued to hurl on in a pseudo-drunken state, nothing new, his mind a frantic jumble. He kept turning back to see if the giant yellow furball was in pursuit, but it merely stayed put, still swaying with the rhythm of the breeze. Jesus, his life was getting worse. To hell with aliens, now Sesame Street was colonizing the planet. A loud shout broke his thoughts. "Agent Mulder!" The scratchy, hollow voice came from behind him. Krychek, Mulder muttered, barely able to speak from the running. "Mulder, you know about the truth, don't you?" he asked, also breathless. "I know they've got Scully." "Oh yeah, they've got Scully, all right. Come with me." Krychek grabbed Mulder's arm, brushing him slightly with the hem of his tutu. "Krychek in a tutu? Apparently he always wears one." "Krychek, why are you—" Krychek traced Mulder's eyes to his frilly ballet skirt. "What? What the hell is—" He waved his arms around in disbelief. "That!" He glared hard, trying to cut through the insanity. But there it was, Krychek's lanky, hairy, goose-pimpled legs descending from a ridiculously stiff pink tutu, like a very last-minute stand-in for Swan Lake. And his feet, that was the weirdest thing. He had on his usual work shoes, with a tutu. Looking up and down, it was man, woman, man, woman, man. Mulder, you're sidetracking, Krychek yelled. What? I always wear it. Come on, there's no time. Mulder shook his head, trying to knock out an answer to this madness. So there they went, two grown men running down the road, one in a rather fetching tutu. You found it fetching? It was cute. Nice material, smooth lace. Actually, it would look quite nice on you if you were to... Mulder! Yeah, so anyway, we're here. Mulder and Tutu Boy stood in front of a shabby, decaying, presumably abandoned, isn't it always, warehouse. This is it? This is where Scully and the aliens are? Who said anything about aliens? Mulder frowned and pushed in front of Krychek, bursting through the door. When they left the warehouse... Hey, wait a minute, Mulder. You didn't tell me what happened inside the warehouse. Oh, you don't want me to tell you that, Mulder... The warehouse was dimly lit, and all that existed in a large open room was a few scattered chairs. Birds sat tweeting at one another on, Get to the point, Mulder. He drew a sharp breath. There, in the center of the room, was a happy couple engaged in a tango, passionately compressed against one another as they danced, their eyes burning into the wall as they approached it like a fierce battering ram, hammering their feet into the floor. It was then that he realized, Mulder? Hoo. Mulder threw his head back as he chuckled. I'm sorry, Scully, it's just that, He turned, avoiding her glance. His body was trembling uncontrollably. He grabbed a flyer from the desk and shielded his face. Mulder, Scully snatched the flyer. I'm sorry, Scully, just that the thought of you and Skinner... What? Me and Skinner? Mulder, have you gone completely insane? She scrunched the flyer into a ball and volleyed it into the bin before perching on the desk. I was not the one playing strictly ballroom with the assistant director, Mulder pursed his lips in disapproval. A moment passed and he softened, speaking gently. It was definitely you and him, Scully. He began as if he were breaking some bad news. He sat next to her on the desk and leaned close, placing an arm around her shoulders. He had turned serious now and sighed before whispering gently. It was him. It couldn't have been anyone else. I recognized his bald head shimmering in the light. She lashed out, swiping him a backhander. Mulder ducked out of sight behind a conveniently placed table and continued to observe in the name of science. The music stopped. Scully craned her neck to look up at Walter, smiling contently, his expression mirroring hers. Skinner released himself and sidled over to a chair. He sank into it, exhausted. There were large beads of sweat coming from his shiny head. Scully walked over to the chair as Skinner patted his lap, beckoning her to sit with him. She smiled willingly and plopped satisfactorily onto his tweed trousers. Mulder gaped at the sight as Scully proceeded to wrap her arms around his neck and initiate a game of tonsil tennis. He had a firm grip on her behind as she stroked and caressed the broad domain of skin above his glasses. As Mulder watched, they became more involved in their passion, becoming breathless and, Okay, Mulder, I think that's more than I need to know. I can't believe you just stood there and watched. Well, I couldn't do much else. I didn't want to interrupt. I always knew you kids would get together. Not exactly like that, but I knew, he declared proudly with a slight wink. Scully folded her arms across her chest. Okay, we can skip that part. Carry on. Are you sure you don't want me to tell you about when he reached... No. Mulder left the warehouse with Tutu Boy, closing the door carefully as the music could no longer conceal its squeak. So you see, Mulder, you're powerless to stop it. Nobody can. Men have tried, but what are you talking about? The Force, of course. Force? You just saw an example of it in there. He pointed to the warehouse. Don't tell me you can see what's going on in front of your eyes. He stretched his eyelids open with his fingertips. Mulder flinched. But you mean all along you thought this was a straightforward case of aliens and UFOs? Well, God, Mulder, you need to work on your investigation skills. He breathed an impatient sigh. Speaking like he had said it 100 times, he murmured, The aliens induced a disease into the American population in the form of a black oil. You mean that's a love potion? Yeah, what did you think that was? A life-threatening virus? Oh, Mulder, you're killing me. Ha ha, ha ha ha. Okay, so now you're telling me that Krychek actually laughed. Well, it was kind of a little snort, you know? Snort. So if this is more than alien colonization, what's with all the abductions? The impatient sigh again. They abduct people to extract their hormones for the potion. They love juices. He looked up at Mulder, who had stopped walking in order to digest this new information, his hands pressing tightly on his temples. Krychek looked around, surveying the area for any eavesdroppers, and then whispered, "Hey, you know EBEs?" "Extrabiological entities," Mulder answered confidently. "Nope, just a code name. Stands for extra bodily excitement." "You're kidding me," Mulder mumbled back. "Let me show you another example. Come with me." He fumbled in his pink fluffy handbag for a pink fluffy handbag. Did I not mention the handbag? Now that would not suit you, but the tutu would. Well, let's continue the story. He fumbled frantically in his handbag. Where's that goddamn wand? He suddenly looked upward at the sky, wildly yelling, "You told me I could get a new wand! To hell with you!" Mulder stepped backwards, suddenly afraid of Krychek and his diva's ego. "Ah, here it is. Good, let's go." He tapped the wand, first on his head, then Mulder's. "Mulder, besides Sesame Street, did you happen to be a fan of cliché-ridden fairy tales?" The next thing he knew, Mulder was in the street again. He sighed with relief, until he realized it was a different street. Diana's street. Oh Lord, this just keeps getting better and better. Why are we here? We're here to see Diana. Diana who? Diana who? Well, I had to at least pretend. Diana Fowley. A contrasting voice cut through the air. "You're Chickadee, remember?" Mulder spun around. "Frohaki?" "Hey, Mulder, Krychek, nice seeing ya. Gotta go." And with that, he jumped on a nearby motorcycle and sped off into the distance. "Could this possibly get any worse?" Mulder murmured. "Mulder, come with me." He looked at Krychek gingerly. "Do I have to? I want to show you another example of the effects of this drug." Krychek led Mulder around to the back of the house. "Couldn't we just be civil and use the door?" "Shh! They'll hear you," he whispered back. "They? Look." Krychek gestured to the nearby window. In the middle of what looked like the sitting room stood Diana, her arms wrapped around someone's neck as they kissed passionately. She was wearing a dangerously short miniskirt and cream blouse. Her jacket had been flung on a sofa beside them. Mulder squinted to identify the man that stood facing her, his hand supporting her waist tightly and smoothing her hair. Mulder's curiosity was at last satisfied as the man drew back from a devouring kiss. Mulder almost choked on his own air as a puff of smoke rose from between the two people. Oh my God, the smoking man? The very same. Scully glared at Mulder in shock. But Diana and the smoking man? Scully, I'm just as shocked as you are, he sighed, thoughtful. The drug is obviously effective. Oh no, Mulder, you're not telling me you actually believe this crazy dream of yours. It's a dream, Mulder. It's not real. It's just your mind playing tricks. You're confused because of everything that's happened to you. She placed a supporting hand on his arm. Oh, come on, Scully, cut it with the scientific crap for a moment, will you? Anyway, you haven't heard the rest of the story. Mulder's mouth moved frantically as he searched for the words. How long has this been going on? Long enough. Skinner tried to stop it. You mean Skinner knew? Oh yeah, he has his secrets, Fox. Can I call you Fox? Yeah, whatever. So how many people have been affected by this drug? Like the whole bureau? Not all of them, just some. For experimental purposes. Porp? They're guinea pigs. His eyes darted back and forth with paranoia. Prawns in the game. Prawns. Something struck Mulder as they walked away, back down the street. Hey, wait a minute. Huh? How come we're not affected? Krychek stopped walking as he reached a nearby car. Here, get in. He held open the door as Mulder hesitated slightly, then thought, what the hell, I've come this far. Mulder, why do I get a bad feeling about this? Krychek climbed in the driver's side and slumped into the seat. Mulder watched him inquisitively as he gazed dreamily through the windscreen. Cratchit, I don't want to rush you after all you've told me, but I really should be getting... Before Mulder could finish, Cratchit was reaching for his neck and hungrily, urgently wetting his lips. God, Mulder, what is wrong with you? She eyed him closely. I mean, are you trying to tell me something here? 'Cause there are better ways. Scully, I'd never run so fast in my whole damn life. He stopped, noticing Scully quivering slightly, a grin quickly escaping her face. Scully, are you laughing at me? She inhaled sharply. No, Mulder, I'm not laughing. I'm sorry, Mulder. It's just... Scully grabbed the flyer from the bin. Well, I'm glad you're able to derive some amusement from all of this. Scully pulled herself together, returning to her frustration. Mulder, really, how many times do I have to remind you this was just a dream? Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Scully, I've had my fair share of weird dreams, but this one was different somehow. It was so real, so lifelike. You just don't want to believe it because of what happened. It's okay to admit that, Scully. Scully's eyes rolled. A thought struck Mulder. No, actually, you probably wouldn't remember any of it because of the drug. How convenient, Scully mumbled. You know what? I'm done trying to convince you. I'm going home. I'm gonna finish up here, and Mulder turned back. No more cheese. Mulder nodded and left the room. Scully began gathering the loose sheets of paper on the desk. Just as she put them in a folder, Mulder cocked his head around the door. Hey, Scully, I think Skinner's alone in his office, he grinned. Mulder sighed as he got into his car. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should lay off the cheese puffs. He reached for his phone on the seat next to him while his other hand turned the ignition. But that didn't feel like a phone. He slowly turned to see what his hand was clasped around. Sure, there on the seat, like some bloody murder weapon, was that very fetching wand Mulder had seen in Cratchit's hand only moments ago. Scully! And this is the end of part 1. Now, when we were doing the live stream, we did 2 sessions. We read part 1 and 2 in one session, and then the next week we read part 3 and 4. Of course, for this episode, I'm going to do all of them in one sitting. Part 2. Too much coffee. Summary. Mulder has another weird lucid dream, and this time Scully tries to help him out of it, getting a bit more back from him than she bargained for. Dana Scully's apartment, 2:55 a.m. Scully nuzzled into the pillow, stubbornly ignoring the frantic call of her alarm. A few more minutes wouldn't hurt. In between blissful lapses of sleep, the alarm continued its desperate knocking sound. Wait a minute. Since when did the alarm make a knocking sound? She stumbled drowsily down the stairs, wrapping herself in a toweling robe as she went. She peered cautiously through the peephole, wondering who the hell would call this early. And, answering her own question, realized that only one person would. She opened the door, rubbing her eyes into a blur. Mulder burst in, unattractive puddles of sweat soaking through his shirt as he frantically grabbed the door from Scully, slammed it shut, and leaned breathlessly against it. Scully froze. Mulder, she started, but was interrupted. It's happening again, Scully. It's happening again, and this time you've got to believe me. He grabbed her arms and shook her roughly, as if she could jolt some conviction into her. Mulder, would you chill out? She shouted. What do you mean? What do you mean it's happening again? The dream, Scully. Scully frowned and tilted her head. Except it's not a dream, but you seem to think it is. For the first time, Scully noticed the rain dripping from Mulder's hair and concluded that the sweat patches were in fact rainwater. Mulder, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't had much sleep, and from the looks of things, neither have you. She reached up and felt his forehead, as she had done many times. You've got a fever. You should rest. She pulled him towards the living room and sat him on the couch. We need to warm you up. She returned a few minutes later with 2 thick patchwork blankets and a steaming mug of something that made Mulder's nostrils retreat. Thank you, nurse. Scully sat next to him and rested her tired, aching head on top of a settee. So was this the revenge of the tutu man? Scully asked, her face displaying seriousness, though he knew she was mocking him. No, I think it was start of the whole tutu thing. Mulder was walking back down the alleyway, radar set to Big Bird alert. Got to find Scully, got to find her. Eventually he saw the warehouse in the distance. He slowed his pace and reached into his boxer shorts to, Whoa, whoa, whoa. Scully held up her hands in defense. No, Scully, I was reaching for my gun. Do you really think I would do that in a public place? I mean, not that I do it anyway. Anyway, I reached for my gun and pointed it cautiously in front of him, expecting a return of Psycho Bill Elliott. But this time he was on his own. After what seemed like hours, he arrived at the door to the warehouse. Just as he reached for the handle, a shadow neared his feet, causing him to spin around, yelling, Freeze! IBF! IBF? Scully said. I was nervous. He turned to face the two people to the left of him, gun still poised, his hands wobbling slightly. He recognized the man first. Spender? Oh, brother. Scully? Jesus. Scully, aren't you Catholic? Scully ignored him. I was there again. Dare I ask what I was doing this time? Mulder nodded. I'm getting to that. Mulder was drawn to the smooth contours of his legs for a moment, but Scully giggled. Don't you mean her legs, Mulder? Mulder looked back at his partner with all seriousness. Nuh-uh. See, that's the thing. He was wearing your skirt, and your jacket, and your shoes, and your... Well, if he was wearing my clothes, then what was I wearing? Mulder grinned at her devilishly as the thought crossed their minds simultaneously. Scully flushed. Just joshing with you. You were wearing his suit. Spender was the first to speak. Agent Mulder, glad you're here. Kratchik's out and I'm in. Mulder surveyed Spender's stature once more just to make sure. Do you guys have some sort of dress code or something? That's irrelevant. Mulder raised his eyebrows. You remember her. Spender gestured flippantly to Scully. Mulder looked at his partner in the brown suit and tie and noticed for the first time that her hair was hoisted in tight pigtails above her head. Her rosy cheeks were dotted with eyeliner-penciled freckles. Pippi Longstocking, isn't it? He asked. Scully frowned, not quite understanding the remark. Fox, nice to see you again. She forced a smile. Yeah, I know. It was definitely you, though. He looked up to see that Scully was staring at him thoughtfully, her head resting on her hand. What? Scully looked at the floor. Nothing. Carry on. Fox. Scully and Spender led Mulder into the warehouse. Spender gestured to a small circle of chairs in the center of the room. As Mulder sat down, the room brought back images of the last time he was there when... Scully shut her eyes. I really don't need remembering, Mulder. Scully looked at her watch, restlessly pacing up and down. They're late. She stopped and turned to Spender. I think you should check up on them. Go see if they're outside. Spender nodded and headed out the door. As soon as the two were alone, Scully rushed to Mulder in a wild panic. Mulder, you've got to help me. Her voice was a desperate whisper. I'm stuck in one of your freaking weird dreams and I'd like to get out if you wouldn't mind. Seeing as you're the one who dreams these things, then maybe you can... Wait, Scully, He shook his head in frustration. I can't believe you still think this is a dream. You're here. You can see it for yourself. Doesn't it all seem too vivid to you? Too real? Mulder, there is nothing real about Spender in a skirt, about me wearing his clothes, about this. She grabbed her pigtails and shook them violently. Okay, so even if this is a dream, what makes you think it's my dream? Because you're the one who had a weird dream like this before. Scully, I told you it wasn't a dream. Scully sighed, frustrated. Mulder, She was interrupted by the miniskirt man. They're on their way, he said, pulling up a chair next to Mulder, and not quite crossing his legs quickly enough. Mulder winced. Would you mind telling me exactly what we're here for? Mulder asked, a little afraid of the answer. Spender looked at Scully, who took a deep breath before answering. Skinner briefed us before we got here. Skinner? He wants to conduct an experiment to improve relationships between FBI agents. Apparently, recent studies have shown that federal agents who are romantically involved stand a much better chance of solving cases together. What kind of experiment? Spender fumbled nervously with the collar of his blouse. Scully strode to a cupboard in the corner of the room and took a large paper bag from the top shelf. She sat back down and emptied the contents on the floor. Mulder frowned at the green glass bottle and small sheet of paper. "What is this? Spin the bottle?" Scully and Spender looked at the floor, their faces solemn. Mulder leaped from the chair, slowly backing away. "Oh, no, 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 no." Mulder waved his hands in disapproval. "Is this one of your fantasies, Mulder, to play and spin the bottle with your fellow colleagues at the FBI? It wasn't my idea. No, seriously, Mulder, are you pulling my leg?" "No, I'm absolutely serious. You should know. You were there." "I give up." Scully's cell phone cut through the fog of embarrassment. "Scully?" "Uh-huh." "Okay, sir." She put her phone back in the pocket. "What's going on?" Spender queried. "They're caught in traffic. There's some Sesame Street festival or something." Mulder flinched. "Skinner said go to Plan B, whatever that is. He said you'd know." "Ah, Plan B, of course." He got up from the chair. "Will you excuse me? I have to make a phone call." Once again he left the room. "Mulder!" Scully whispered. "Look, Scully, I really can't get you out of this. I have no control over it, whether it's a dream or not." The door swung open. "Frohickey, Byers, Langley!" Mulder yelled loudly. "Naturally." The three men frowned, apparently not recognizing the two agents that sat in front of them. Spender followed behind the trio, also confused. "Actually, it's Domingo, Carreras, and Pavarotti, the three tenors. They're here to perform some opera. You know, to get you in the mood." He winked. "The Lone Gunman," Scully began slowly, "as the three tenors. Yet you still to refuse to believe that this is a dream." "I'm not convinced, Scully. I told you, it's highly likely everyone was drugged to make him or her forget what happened to them. Come on, we've seen that before." "So how come you remember it all? Why weren't you drugged?" "I'm not sure about that one yet." He picked up the drink Scully gave him, which was now cold, and made an effort to sip it. "Come on, Mulder, can't you see what's going on here? It couldn't be simpler. You had the dream, therefore that's why you remember it and no one else does." "I still don't agree. But before we get old Jerry Springer," he grimaced and placed the mug back on the table, "let me finish my story." The three men began setting up a stage, large speakers and 2 microphone stands. Mulder noticed that Frohickey had grown a significantly larger beer gut, almost popping the buttons on his shirt. He put it down to Frohickey wanting to resemble his idol the best he could. As they took their positions, Mulder leaned towards Scully, muttering, "Since when do opera singers play drums?" Scully's eyes widened as she too noticed the shiny drum kit gracing the corner of the stage. Frohickey spoke first. This is a number we wrote way back on tour. I hope you like it." He gave a cheesy grin. They began. Scully's face screwed up as if she was under the dentist's drill, and Mulder mirrored her reaction. He focused on Langley, beating the hell out of the drums, his golden wavy hair dancing high above his shoulders. Suddenly his eyes caught sight on something. On the edge of the stage, near Langley's tapping feet, was a small electronic device attached to the stage with bulldog clips. He pointed it out to Scully. Scully squinted to see the object clearly. "I think it's a camera." They clapped at the end of the first piece, keeping up the facade. As the second piece began, the stage was suddenly awash with background dancers, draped in lavish flamenco costumes. Scully sat up abruptly. "Mulder, is that—" Mulder followed her gaze and sat back in shock, his jaw wide open. "Diana?" "Mulder, why does Diana always have to come into this?" "Do I detect a hint of jealousy, Scully?" "I just wondered how she fits into all of this." Mulder leaned closer to Scully. "How would I know? I mean, it was only a dream," he replied mockingly. Scully folded her arms. "Please continue." "I think we need to give the camera what it wants," Mulder declared suddenly, snapping his fingers in excess of 6 times. "I'm not following. We have to, you know." His voice trailed off and he turned away from Scully awkwardly. Scully craned her neck trying to catch his eye. "Have to what, Mulder? Spit it out." Mulder sighed, finally mumbling, "We have to look like we're getting closer. This is ridiculous." Well, that could work." "Put your hand on my knee." Put my hand on your knee? Oh, come on, Scully, don't pretend you weren't flattered. Mulder looked at Scully and then at his knee. She sighed, hesitantly obliging. I'm really starting to hope this is a dream, she muttered under her breath. Mulder moved closer to Scully and stiffly extended an arm around her shoulders, hoping the nervousness didn't show on camera. Despite her apparent uncomfortableness, he sensed she was secretly enjoying the attention. Oh, I doubt it. Scully, I've known you for over 6 years now. When you get horny, I know about it. Mulder. So anyway, Spender came back in the room and saw the meager effort they were making. Oh, come on. You're gonna have to do better than that. They'll be here soon. Mulder and Scully exchanged glances. This isn't kindergarten, you know. He left the room once more. Scully watched him leave. Does he have a bladder problem? Scully, I've got an idea. Do I want to hear it? In no likeliness, no, but I think it's the only way out of this. Just as he heard footsteps approaching the door, he clutched Scully's neck, much to her alarm, and gave her one last nervous sigh before lunging forward and molding his lips to hers. Mulder! And this was the only way you could think of to solve this? I didn't think we had any other options. What would you have done? I don't know, something a little more productive and a great deal less inappropriate? Well, it seemed to work. As soon as I found out... Here they... Spender stood open-mouthed, Skinner not far behind him. Skinner grinned satisfactorily. Spender, I'm promoting you. Janitor Spender. Yes, sir. Thank you. He could barely tear his eyes over the pair as they went for gold. Mulder broke the kiss, looking more than a little embarrassed. One of Scully's pigtails had slid halfway down her head, and her lipstick was smudged over her face. And Mulder's, for that matter. He did his best to flatten his ruffled hair. Sir, could we go now? Please. The grin on Skinner's face was unmistakable. As the two agents arrived back at... Wait, that's it? Mulder. Scully stopped in front of Spender as they neared the door, Skinner beaming proudly at his grade-A student. She asked, Hey, Spender, when do I get my clothes back? Oh, right, yeah. Mulder, what is it? Why did you stop? Scully, Mulder, I really think at this point there's little you can say that would shock me. Mulder sighed. All right, yeah, actually, Spender turned to Mulder. I prefer your suit to mine. How about it, Agent Mulder? About what exactly? We'll do a swap, you and me. You want me to wear that? He gestured to Scully's clothes. Scully snickered, covering her mouth. Spender sighed impatiently. Let me help you make your decision. Suddenly Scully gasped. Mulder followed Scully's gaze and looked down to see he was no longer wearing any trousers. Holy! He slapped his hands down instinctively, his cheeks a delicate pink. He looked up to... Scully, stop laughing. Why do you always find this funnier than I do? I'm sorry, Mulder. She cleared her throat. I'm sorry. Continue, please. He looked up to see Spender still wearing Scully's beige blouse and jacket, now with Mulder's trousers. I guess it's skirt or nothing then, Spender remarked with an air of coolness. Yes, okay, whatever, just... Within seconds, Mulder's hairy legs were protruding from Scully's beige skirt like some surrealist painting. Scully, let's get out of here. Scully stood looking at Mulder's legs, half disgusted, half delighted. Scully? Yes, sorry, let's go. As they walked through the doorway and headed down the alley, Scully turned to Mulder. You sure do have strange dreams, Mulder. Makes the alien conspiracies look not so bad, huh? He joked. There was a long pause before Scully spoke again. You know something? Huh? You're quite a good kisser, Mulder. You made that up. Did I, Scully? Did I? Mulder turned to her as they continued down the long and winding path. Hey, Scully. Yeah? Even if it turns out that this isn't a dream, we don't have to tell anyone about this. Do we? I mean, it's problematic. I would say of all the unbelievable things we've tried to convince people about, this tops it. So no, I think it would be unwise. They were drained. It had been a long whatever, and their feet, minds, and sanity needed a rest. Hey, Mulder. Yeah? Do you think we could change clothes now? Really? I was starting to enjoy the through breeze. Slowly they stood back to back and slipped back into their own attire. He grasped her hand and they walked back home together under the fading gleam of the moon. "That's quite a contented ending for you, Mulder. I'm surprised." "Yeah, well, I owed it to you after that." She smiled back at him. "You still think it's a dream?" he asked. "Without a doubt." "Okay, so," Mulder reached into his shirt pocket, "how come I have this?" He unfolded a glossy leaflet displaying 3 peculiar-looking men in suits. It read, "Is your workforce unmotivated? Are they lacking pizzazz? Put some fire in your firm. Ring the 3 tenors on 555-Fro-Hickey for a decision you won't regret." Scully passed the flyer back to Mulder and crossed her feet on the coffee table. "I've been working with you for way too long. You still have the wand, right? Top drawer by the TV." Mulder walked over to the drawer and placed the leaflet next to Krychek's wand. As he slid it shut, he wondered what the next edition would be. Part 3. Too much non-fat to foodie rice dreamsicle. Yep, it's Scully's turn. Much to Mulder's glee, Scully had a very strange, lucid dream. Now, will she accept Mulder's theory that this is real, or will Mulder backpedal when he realizes what a dream universe could offer? Mulder shifted uncomfortably, frustrated at his lack of sleep and his retrospectively poor choice of pants. He adjusted his pillow, glancing to his right. Scully was dozing, breathing deeply. At first he was smitten, then envious, then a little perturbed when a small snort escaped her. The heavy breathing was steadily turning to a snore. Great. He could never sleep on planes, even on night flights, perhaps especially on night flights. Scully twitched in her sleep and Mulder's eyes snapped back to her. A small smile spread across her face and she murmured, "Real cream cheese." They were halfway through their journey home from another grueling and unresolved case. Mulder played over the events in his mind. Could he have acted faster? Could he have cleared the zoo fence instead of attempting that barbed hole and getting stuck? Could he have wrestled with that giraffe? "Big Bird!" yelled Scully as she jolted violently awake, thrashing one arm at the window and the other into Mulder's unsuspecting eye line. Mulder slowly turned to her, his eyes wide with excitement. What did she just say? A messy-haired child peered at them between the seats in front, then retreated. Scully came around, blinking her eyes back into focus. The first thing she saw was Mulder's face, beaming at her with a goofy smile. "Scully," he began. She quickly shook her head in defiance, stunned and frozen. "You had that dream too, didn't you?" "Mulder." "You went there too!" He could barely contain himself. "How do I get off this plane?" she muttered. "Well, what happened?" Scully was at the local park with her nephew. It was a scorching day, and she could see the heat waves bouncing off the high bars on the swing. She slumped into a bench in the shade. "Don't go too far," she shouted. It really was humid, an uncomfortable, sticky, unrelenting heat. She reached into her rucksack for her flask, but it wasn't there. Just then she sensed a figure next to her on the bench. "Deep Throat?" He smiled warmly at her. "I've got to ask this now. Was he wearing clothes?" "Uh-huh." Mulder thought for a second. "His own clothes?" "Yep." "No ballet attire?" "Nope." "Great." Scully started coughing from the hoarse dryness in her throat. "I'm sorry. Excuse me," she said. "I'm sure I had a flask here somewhere." She rummaged further into her rucksack, but all she could find were rusks and an old tampon. "Would you like mine?" Deep Throat produced a rucksack of his own from somewhere and began pulling out a large glass container. Scully couldn't help but snatch it from him, thirsty and desperate. She unscrewed the lid and rushed the strange glass flask to her lips. Her eyes closed in eager anticipation of some crisp, cool water, which didn't come. Something rubbery nudged her tongue. Her eyes flicked open and she lifted the flask for a closer look. She screamed, her mouth spraying water over a nearby child who ran away, traumatized. She looked down at the flask, now smashed to smithereens on the floor, revealing the alien body inside. "An Erlenmeyer flask?" she shrieked. "You didn't say it was an Erlenmeyer flask!" Your dreams are a little different to mine. Scully snapped her fingers. Dreams? So you admit it was just a dream. Just like yours. Nothing real about it. So nothing about it felt real? Well, not until you turned up. As Scully sat staring at the baby alien on the tarmac floor, still with one ear on her nephew's laughs, she heard barking in the distance. Looking up, she saw the faint blur of a tiny Pomeranian dog standing in front of a big building that had appeared from nowhere in the middle of the playground. Queequeg! She started running. As she arrived at the warehouse, Mulder gasped. The warehouse! Queequeg darted through the cat flap. Mulder gasped again, then frowned. The warehouse had a cat flap? Scully threw herself to the ground and frantically punched her arm through the flap. As she stretched further, she felt her arm extend, growing through the hole and deep into the inside. Her fingers elongated unnaturally, feeling along the dirty floor, grabbing blindly for her companion. Her arm grew longer still. Is it only arms? Because I feel like this might have benefited me more, Scully smirked. Eating human livers doesn't sound so bad now, huh? Just then, a large wooden crate fell from the ceiling, landing straight on Scully's fingers, crushing them flat. She screamed. Hey, so when do I arrive? I thought I was in it too. Crushed, Mulder. My fingers were crushed. Mulder held up his hands in surrender. Her fingers were crushed. As she cried out in agony, trying to wiggle the feeling back into her mangled hands, she knew there was no going back. She had to climb through the flap. Wasn't there a door? She squeezed her head through the small hole, then her shoulders. She pulled hard. Her hips protested, caught on the frame. She could see Queequeg sat at the end of the room. A man stooped down and stroked the dog. She heard him whisper, "One rat to another." "There he is! But where am I?" "Don't you touch her, Krychek," she yelled. Just then the door swung open, with Scully still in it. Her legs dragged across the floor. "Hey!" she cried. So there was a door. The smoking man looked down at Scully and placed a cigarette in his mouth. This is unexpected. Finally, Scully wrenched herself free from the cat flap. She headed for Queequeg and Krychek, who were now enrobed in darkness as the door swung closed again behind her. As she got closer, she could make out Krychek's weaselly form, but no Queequeg. "Sir," Krychek began, "I did as you asked." Scully couldn't help but notice an odd, squeaky quiver to his usually quite sexy voice. Mulder raised a finger. Scully looked at the ceiling. "You can enjoy his body in a tutu, but I can't find his voice sexy?" Krychek continued, "Sir, I took the vial from Skinner's desk and brought it here." "What about my voice? Do you find my voice sexy?" Scully sighed. "How about if I growl a little?" He turned to face her head on. "No one down here but the FBI's most unwanted," he gnarled. The child peeked through the crack again. "Give me the vial, Alex," said the smoky man. Krychek was silent. "Give it to me." "There's a bit of a problem with that." A noise escaped Krychek that was familiar to Scully, though she couldn't quite place it. "What do you mean?" he asked, irritated. "There was a mishap on my way over here. Her stupid dog got in the way and I dropped it." "You mean you don't have the love potion?" he spat. "It's a little worse than that. When I dropped it, the contents splashed over me and the dog. Sir, I think there was something off with this batch." He made the strange noise again, and this time Scully knew why she recognized it. Horror ripped through her body. The smoky man whipped out a torch and shone it straight at Krychek. The bright beam revealed Krychek's suited body, with Queequeg's ruffled Pomeranian head protruding grotesquely from the top of his shirt. An air hostess came to their seats. "Nuts?" "You said it, sister," said Mulder. Scully nearly vomited. "So wait," began Mulder. "The weird sound you heard was Queequeg?" "Same noise he used to make when he needed the toilet." Mulder screwed up his face in disgust. "Scully, you know I love you, but I think you might be unwell." There was a loud creak. Scully's attention was diverted to the crate that had so mercilessly landed on her fingers. The panel at the front was bending and bulging. There was something inside trying to get out. Queequeg panted excitedly, his slimy tongue lolling out of his mouth. The side of the crate splintered. Scully stood with her back to the wall, her eyes glued to the box. Two more thoughts followed, and the side of the crate split open. Mulder exited the crate in a forward roll. "About time," Scully smiled, first at Mulder, then to herself. She looked back at him and said softly, "You were naked." Mulder nodded slowly, not at all surprised. He looked thoughtful. "What do you do for reference, given that you've never seen that area of me? I can fill in the blanks." "I hope you're generous," he paused. "And I hope you appreciate that this kind of thing didn't happen in my dream. I never saw your blanks." "But you did experience quite a bit of me nonetheless." "I did." Scully rushed to Mulder, took off her trench coat, and wrapped it around him. "Thanks, Scully." Mulder looked around and stopped sharp as his eyes fell on the man-dog abomination in the corner. Cryquick nibbled at an itch on his arm. "What the hell?" The dulcet tones of her partner's voice awakened something in Scully. "So you do find my voice sexy?" "It was more that it brought me back down to earth." "You say all the right things," he quipped. "Mulder, I don't think this is real. I think this is a dream. But it feels so real. I've been trying to get out of that crate for hours, Scully." "Can you remember how you got there?" Mulder looked resigned. "No." "See? Well, what if we were drugged? All of us? It's possible." Mulder shivered under the coat. "Let's get out of here," said Scully. Hearing her, Cryqueg started walking towards them. Mulder and Scully exchanged glances. Cryqueg looked pained as all the fur would allow him to express anyway. As he reached them, he started whining. Instinctively, Scully ruffled his head. "It's okay, girl. Boy, whatever." Cryqueg wrapped his arms around her waist. The three of them stood there, a man with a dog's head, a bedraggled woman with scratched legs, and a second man, naked in a trench coat. Scully tried to peel Cryqueg off of her, but he wouldn't budge. "Mulder, a little help here?" Mulder looked around for inspiration. His eyes fell on a plank of wood from the busted crate. He picked it up. "Here, boy!" He ran out of the warehouse and threw it into the woods, which had replaced the park. Cryqueg released his grip and eagerly scampered after it on his hands and feet. Scully caught up with Mulder. "Thanks," she muttered. Scully looked around. "What happened to the park?" "Park? Never mind. Hey, is that a diner?" It was a diner. It was called Big Bird's Big Yellow Restaurant, and it was remarkably ordinary, much to their relief. For some reason, Mulder, rather than Scully, went to get the food, fostering some weird looks from the locals when they noticed his lack of trousers. He shuffled awkwardly back to their table and placed a bagel in front of Scully. "Real cream cheese," she smiled. Mulder stared thoughtfully past Scully and out of the cabin window. "You know, Scully, in my dreams, I always seem to be looking for you. So in a way, this makes sense. I mean, I can only consider the term extremely loosely in this scenario, but yeah, I guess." Mulder smiled. Scully continued, "But maybe it's just my subconscious mind. You told me about your dreams, so that's bound to influence mine." "Maybe," Mulder acquiesced. Scully's head rolled towards him. "You know, it's funny that you're so hell-bent on this being a reality." Mulder sat up. "What do you mean?" "It's just that if these are dreams, and lucid one at that, well, what is it?" "Lots of lucid dreamers can control their dreams. Wouldn't you find it interesting? A kind of sanctuary where you could safely play out your deepest inhibitions without fear of repercussions?" Mulder looked into her eyes and held her gaze. She gazed back, only her eyes were dancing slightly, like she was searching him, imploring him to realize what she had, that this could be lots and lots of fun. Now, in the notes to the third part, Katie wrote, "This is the first installment I've written since the original 2 stories I wrote back in the 90s. They were pretty bonkers, but I'm edging into more serious territory and some new ideas of where to take it. Thanks for reading." Part 4. Too much and not enough. Mulder and Scully try to find each other in the dream world, but Scully gets stuck in an anxiety dream and Mulder can't get marine monologue Skinner to take him seriously. Spoiler warning for the episode Bad Blood from season 5. Mulder sat on the sofa and pulled off his shoes. What did she mean by deepest inhibitions? He had been thinking about their conversation all the way home in the taxi. What started as a whimsical foray into the absurd was suddenly becoming more serious. He felt a little nervous, anxious even. They had arrived back in D.C. late afternoon, and darkness was sauntering into his apartment. He stretched out on the sofa and took off his tie. He was wired. No way he was going to sleep any better than on the plane. He realized that while the idea of controlling the events of his dreams was exciting, he didn't want to do that on his own. He wanted her to be there. His constant. Just like in real life, he needed that safeguard, the pace setter. He knew that without her, he might spiral out of control. Night closed in, and his eyes grew heavy. He was standing in front of the warehouse again, but no Scully. The wind blew fiercely, throwing a flurry of dust into his face. His hands shot to his cheeks and wiped at his eyes. When he opened them again, patches of the warehouse were missing, like bits of a painting that had been washed away. The more he rubbed, the more it erased, until there was nothing left, and he found himself standing in the corridors of the J. Edgar Hoover building. He heard footsteps. Scully? Then came a squeaking noise. God, no, not Craikwig. But this was closer to a mechanical sound, like something turning on an axis. In the dim distance, as the noise grew louder, something small and red appeared, with a wash of blonde hair above it. It was Marita Covarrubias on a tricycle. Marita? Her face was deadly serious, true to form. Even as the tiny wheels squeaked under her and her knees kissed her cheeks, she remained stoic. Her feet pedaled furiously as she appeared not to notice Mulder, who, silent and dismayed, watched her race past. Agent Mulder. Skinner poked his head out of a nearby office door. Mulder walked over. What you got, a unicycle? Skinner looked stern. Agent Mulder, you're late. Mulder obediently walked into the office. Skinner closed the door. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and fished out a packet of yellow powder. Sherbet? Mulder shook his head. Probably another weird potion. I thought you liked flying saucers, retorted Skinner. A ginormous pencil fell from the ceiling and Skinner caught it, crashing it down on a nearby symbol. Mulder blinked. Sir, does this situation strike you as odd at all? He inhaled sharply. Mulder, have I told you about when I was in Vietnam? Oh no, not this story. Yes, sir. Skinner put his hands in his pockets and looked up at the ceiling in earnest. I enlisted in the Marine Corps the day of my 18th birthday. I did it on blind faith. Mulder sank into a nearby chair. Skinner paced the floor. I did it because it was the right thing to do, he sighed. I don't know, maybe I still do. He took another sharp breath and spun on his heels. 3 weeks into my tour, a hula hoop rolled into our camp. Mulder frowned. A what? A hula hoop, Mulder. I couldn't believe it either. He cursed under his breath. The damn hoop. Mulder could see the veins engorged in his face. He reached the desk and did another bow turn. It chose me, Mulder. What could I do? He looked at Mulder and held up his hands. Mulder held up his own hands, eyes wide and pursing his lip in consensus. I tried day and night to tame that beast. The hoop? Yes. But it couldn't be tamed. She was a wild stallion. My coordination was no match. My hips were too stubborn. He slapped his hands on his sides. Damn it! Mulder stood up. Sir, I really should be. Skinner made fists and let out a wail. I think you might need therapy, sir, but I have to go. Scully lay in bed, struggling to sleep. It had been a weird day. She wondered if Mulder was asleep yet. She reached for some water, checking the glass for any rubber bits first. Who knew what was real and what was a dream at this point? She glanced at her bedside table, and her eyes fell on a recent impulse buy, a bright pink book by some fancy celeb. It was full of anonymous fantasies, and she had found it a little crude for her palate. But hey, if it helped her sleep. She was at the warehouse. There was no park this time. She walked towards the door. It was padlocked shut, and the cat flap was boarded up. Probably for the best. Her knees tingled from the memory. Mulder, she called. Are you there? She heard someone shout, Damn it! But it didn't sound like Mulder. She ran around the side looking for another entrance. It was icy cold. Steam bounced off the walls of the warehouse. It must have been warm inside. Her face was freezing and her jaw ached. Actually, it was really starting to hurt. She noticed then that something felt strange in her mouth. She tentatively poked a finger inside, roaming her teeth. As she pulled her finger back out, a tooth caught on it, bending forward. She cringed, letting go. She gently probed the tooth with her tongue, and it bent again. She'd had dreams like this before, a classic anxiety dream. What did it mean again? That she was afraid of losing people or treasured things? Makes sense. She had already misplaced Mulder. Freud thought teeth falling out represented repressed wishes. Right now it represented a pain in the ass when she needed to get going. She gripped with all her might and yanked at the tooth, but rather than coming out, it grew a little longer. What is it with my appendages? She thought. She pulled again. The tooth extended upwards some more, now tall enough to reach the roof of her mouth, holding it open. Scully felt a rising panic. Suddenly something entered her peripheral vision, and she looked round to see a man in sheriff's uniform. He tipped his hat. "Howdy," he drawled in a southern accent. Sheriff Hartwell, with the buck teeth. Didn't look so bad now in this new context. Said Scully, struggling to form words. Sheriff Hartwell squinted. "I think there's something in your, he trailed off. She said. "I missed you," he said quietly. He extended a leg, dusting the floor with his toes. "Now's not the time." His goofy grin dropped. He looked a bit upset, then a little angry. "It's okay," thought Scully. "This is just a dream, remember?" But Hartwell was starting to look really pissed. His eyes glowed green like the night she had sat in the car with him in Cheney, Texas. This couldn't be good. He reached into his holster and a second later was pointing a gun at Scully. Scully tried to respond quickly but felt she was moving in slow motion. The bullet struck her in the teeth, or rather, the tooth. It shattered and the shards fell to the floor. She gingerly tongued the inside of her mouth, feeling all around and realized to her relief it was all back to normal again. Sheriff Hartwell had vanished. Scully breathed hard and sank to the floor. Her head pounded. She felt dizzy and nauseous. To make matters worse, the tinny sound of a zany carnival song filtered into her surroundings, getting louder and louder. She recognized it as a classic circus theme, Entry of the Gladiators. In the distance, she saw a small yellow clown car heading towards her, and she realized the music was coming from its speakers. Who was that bald man at the wheel? She strained her eyes to get a better look, but the image turned blurry and the music started slowing down until at last it became the rhythmic chant of her alarm clock. The office door swung open and Mulder stood in the frame, looking disheveled. "Mulder?" She looked up. "I didn't sleep well." "Me neither." "I had a strange dream again," said Scully, slowly resting her head back on the desk. Mulder walked in and tripped over the waste bin, landing on one leg and balancing there for a moment. "Me too. So much for the excitement of testing our inhibitions," he sighed. He pulled up a chair opposite Scully, slid out of his jacket and rested his head on his hand. "Was I there?" he mumbled. "No, I couldn't find you." She lifted her head from the desk and rested her chin on her hands, looking at Mulder. "I tried. I couldn't find you either. But I sensed you were there. I got stuck with Skinner spouting a monologue about being in the Marines." "That old chestnut," Mulder smirked, "with a few tweaks." Scully smiled and looked thoughtful. "Skinner was in your dream?" "I think I saw him in mine, too, right at the end, in a tiny clown car." Mulder sat up straight. "He was raving about a hula hoop in my dream. Don't you think that's a coincidence? And what with Marita Covarrubias on a trike?" he muttered. Who on a what?" "Maybe we were in the same dream after all, Scully. We just missed each other." He leaned back in his chair, ruminating some more. "You know, this has all been happening since we've been working on this case, spending time together." "Isn't that natural?" asked Scully. "But we haven't been dreaming in the same place. Maybe that's why we never meet in the dream world. Maybe it's because we're too far apart in the real world, like bad cell phone reception." Scully looked skeptical. She was tired. Mulder's eyes widened excitedly. "Maybe we need to sleep together." "I don't think we need to be that close." Mulder enjoyed her exasperation and made a mental note of it. He smiled. "No, I mean in the same room. Maybe if we dream in the same room, we'll meet in the dream." He absent-mindedly made an O with his hand and placed a finger in the hole. Scully raised her eyebrows. Mulder sat on his hands. Mulder, how about we just go back to being normal people and wait for these dreams to stop? Scully, you were the one who suggested taking advantage of this lucidity. Scully went to speak, then stopped. What are you afraid of? I don't know, Mulder. I'm not good at relinquishing control. I tried last night and then ended up having a textbook anxiety dream instead. I'll be there with you. That might increase my anxiety. Mulder grinned. Come try it with me. Just once. If all your teeth fall out, we can get you dentures. Scully sighed. And this is the end of part 4. So far, the end of the story. In the notes, Katie writes that Skinner's hula hoop monologue is a parody of his monologue in one breath. I think she wrote it brilliantly. I love this whole story. You've heard me rave about it in the Twitch streams. I really love the story. I think it's, first of all, I have a soft spot for comedic X-Files, for surrealist X-Files. Some of my favorite episodes are comedies. I love Darren Morgan's surrealist, trippy scripts. And, of course, this story was right up my alley. Also, I love the characterization. I think it's so spot on. You know, you read too many fanfic that just get the characters all wrong. But this is not one of those cases. So kudos to you, Katie, and I hope you like this reading, this interpretation. I feel like some parts were not as good as when we did the live reading. I feel like my performance was better in a live reading, but as I said, we have to do this again because of the technical problems in the live streams. So, I don't know. Katie said that she will probably continue writing this story, but of course there's no pressure and there's no rush. As someone who used to write fan fiction, I know the pressures of wanting to continue with the story and life getting in the way. But anyway, thank you for sticking around. You can read Katie's fanfic, all 4 parts, on her page on Archive of Our Own. I will post the link in the info, the description of this episode on SoundCloud and on YouTube and on Spotify and Podchaser. Those are the platforms where you can listen to this podcast. I will also post the links to my socials and to Katie's socials. And next episode, we are going to do a bit of a history deep dive. I'm not going to spoil too much, but it involves my ship, my favorite pairing. You can guess which one it is. So, and once again, no part of this episode may be used to train, using air quotes, so-called AI models. So, deal with that. And I'll see you next month. Bye.